In the pre-dawn darkness of March 8, 2014, while the sprawling city of Kuala Lumpur slept beneath a blanket of tropical humidity, a ritual as old as commercial aviation itself was unfolding. Gate departure, pre-flight checks, passenger boarding, everything ordinary. A Boeing 777-200ER, registration 9M MRO, sat at the gate, its twin engines silent, its fuselage gleaming under the airport's sodium lights. This was not just any aircraft. The 777 was, and remains, a marvel of modern engineering. Redundant systems, satellite communication, real-time tracking, built for an era where aviation had become so safe, so predictable, that disappearance was thought to be impossible. On board were 239 souls, families traveling together, business people heading to meetings, a group of Chinese artists returning from an exhibition, 20 employees of a Texas-based tech company, lovers, strangers, children, all bound for Beijing Capital International Airport on what should have been a routine overnight flight. 6 hours, 1,200 miles. Breakfast service somewhere over the South China Sea. At 12:41 a.m. local time, the aircraft pushed back from the gate. By 12:42, it was taxiing. At 0:42 UTC, 1:42 a.m. Malaysia time, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 lifted off runway 32R, climbing into the humid night sky, turning northeast over the Strait of Malacca. Everything was nominal. Every system, green. Radio static. At 1:19 a.m., as the aircraft reached the boundary between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, Lumpur radar issued a standard instruction. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. The response came back immediately. Calm, professional, unremarkable. Good night. Malaysian 370. Long pause. Silence. Those were the last words ever heard from flight MH370. Within 90 seconds, the aircraft's transponder, the device that broadcasts its identity, altitude, and position to air traffic control, went silent. The radar blip labeled MH370 vanished, and with it, 239 people disappeared from the face of the Earth. At first, there was no alarm. Aircraft don't always appear perfectly on radar. Handoffs between air traffic control sectors can be delayed. Communications sometimes lag. In the vast, invisible architecture of controlled airspace, small glitches are expected. But this was not a glitch. At 1:21 a.m., Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control expected to see MH370 on their radar. They saw nothing. They called out on the radio. No response. They tried again. Silence. They contacted Kuala Lumpur. Have you lost contact with Malaysian 370? Lumpur confirmed. The aircraft had left their airspace. It should be with Ho Chi Minh now, but it wasn't. At 1:38 a.m., just 19 minutes after the last transmission, Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control formally requested that Malaysia Airlines attempt to contact the aircraft using alternative frequencies. Still nothing. At 2:15 a.m., nearly an hour after the disappearance, Malaysia Airlines Operations Center tried to reach the cockpit using a satellite phone system. The call connected, but no one answered. By 2:40 a.m., the reality was undeniable. MH370 was missing, not delayed, not diverted, missing. At 6:30 a.m., 5 hours after takeoff, the aircraft was scheduled to land in Beijing. Families gathered at the arrivals terminal, holding flowers, checking their phones, expecting to see loved ones walk through the gate. The flight never arrived, and on the departure boards at Beijing Capital International, next to flight MH370, a single word appeared: delayed. Then hours later, canceled. In modern aviation, this should not be possible. Aircraft are tracked by primary radar, secondary radar, satellite systems, and onboard transponders. They communicate constantly. They leave digital trails. Even when disasters occur, engine failure, structural collapse, catastrophic weather, there is wreckage, debris, evidence. But MH370 left none. It simply ceased to exist. In the first chaotic days after the disappearance, the search area grew in a way that defied comprehension. Initially, authorities focused on the aircraft's planned route, a corridor stretching northeast from Malaysia toward Vietnam and southern China. Ships, aircraft, helicopters, nothing. Then, military radar data emerged, classified at first, then reluctantly disclosed, showing something extraordinary. After its transponder went dark, MH370 had not continued toward Beijing. It had turned, sharply, deliberately, back across the Malay Peninsula, over the Strait of Malacca, heading west, away from its destination, away from help, away from any logical explanation. Pause. The search area expanded from the Gulf of Thailand to the Andaman Sea to the northern reaches of Sumatra. But there was more. Satellite engineers at Inmarsat, a British communications company, discovered something that would change everything. MH370's engines had continued transmitting automated handshakes to a satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above the Indian Ocean. These were not distress signals, not messages, just electronic pings, digital breadcrumbs exchanged once per hour, confirming the aircraft was still powered, still flying. The final ping was recorded at 8:19 a.m., more than 7 hours after takeoff. But the pings provided no GPS coordinates, no altitude, no heading, only one thing: distance from the satellite. Using complex mathematics, Doppler analysis, arc trajectories, fuel calculations, engineers determined two possible flight paths: a northern corridor stretching across Central Asia over landlocked nations with dense radar coverage, or a southern corridor arcing deep into the remote Indian Ocean, one of the most isolated expanses of water on Earth. The northern route was quickly ruled out. No radar anywhere along that path had detected the aircraft. That left the south. Pause. Ocean ambience. And so, the search shifted to an area so vast, so desolate, that it defied imagination. An ocean deeper than Everest is tall. Underwater mountain ranges, trenches, volcanic ridges, no witnesses, no islands, no shipping lanes, just water. The search became the largest and most expensive in aviation history. Ships equipped with sonar scanned the ocean floor, meter by meter, looking for wreckage that might not even exist. Aircraft flew grid patterns over endless blue, searching for debris that currents could have carried thousands of miles. Months passed, then a year, then two. Still, nothing. No fuselage, no tail section, no black boxes, just the ocean, vast and indifferent. For the families left behind, the disappearance of MH370 was not a mystery to be solved. It was a wound that would not close. Grief, psychologists tell us, follows stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But what happens when there is no body, no wreckage, no confirmation? What happens when closure is indefinitely postponed? Naren Balasubramaniam is one of those left in limbo. His wife, Chandrika, was a flight attendant on MH370. They had been married for 6 years. She was 29 years old. In the weeks after the disappearance, Naren waited by the phone, watched the news, attended briefings. Hope, at first, felt reasonable, but hope became its own form of cruelty. Naren, the hardest part isn't the loss, it's the not knowing. Because if you don't know what happened, you can't let go. You can't move forward. Every day, you wake up wondering, is today the day we find out? And every day, the answer is no. For the Chinese families, who made up the majority of the passengers, the anguish was compounded by frustration with authorities. Press conferences became confrontations. Briefings dissolved into shouting matches. They held vigils, organized protests, demanded accountability. But accountability requires answers, and there were none. Some families hired private investigators. Others turned to psychics. A few funded independent search efforts, crowdfunding expeditions into the Indian Ocean, anything to avoid the unbearable weight of uncertainty. 10 years on, the grief has evolved, not into acceptance, into anger, because after a decade, the question is no longer, what happened to our loved ones? It is, why have we been abandoned? When physical evidence fails to materialize, speculation rushes in to fill the void. And in the case of MH370, suspicion turned inevitably toward the cockpit. The captain, Zaharie Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, 18,000 flight hours, a veteran, respected by peers, known for his professionalism, his love of flying, his technical skill. He built a flight simulator at home, an expensive, sophisticated setup used by aviation enthusiasts worldwide. The first officer, Farik Abdul Hamid, 27 years old, recently promoted to the 777, still completing training. This was one of his first flights without a check captain supervising. Young, eager, unproven, in the absence of answers, investigators did what investigators do. They looked for motive. Zaharie's personal life was examined, his marriage, his politics, his social media activity. Forensic analysts recovered deleted data from his home flight simulator. What they found ignited a firestorm. Among the simulation files were flight paths, some incomplete, some fragmented, showing routes into the southern Indian Ocean. Routes that ended in the middle of nowhere. Headlines seized on the revelation. Captain's simulator held clues. MH370. Pilot suicide theory gains ground. Motor suicide in the cockpit. The implication was clear. Zaharie had practiced this, planned it, executed it. But was it true? Aviation experts were skeptical. Simulator files, they pointed out, are often incomplete, fragmented. Flight simulation enthusiasts save waypoints, test extreme scenarios, explore unusual routes, not because they intend to fly them, but because they're curious. Zaharie was known to experiment with remote airstrips, challenging weather, emergency procedures. His family defended him. Friends called the accusations character assassination. But in a vacuum of evidence, narrative becomes reality. And once suspicion is planted, it is almost impossible to uproot. To this day, Zaharie's name is inseparable from MH370. Guilty by association. Condemned by mystery. After years of analysis, official investigations, independent researchers, aviation experts, the theories surrounding MH370 have largely coalesced around two possibilities, both horrifying, both plausible, both incomplete. Theory 1, the rogue pilot. In this scenario, the disappearance was deliberate. At some point after the final radio transmission, someone in the cockpit, most likely the captain, decided to make the aircraft vanish. The transponder was manually switched off. The Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, ACARS, which transmits engine data and diagnostics, was disabled. The aircraft turned sharply, flying back across Malaysia, deliberately avoiding radar coverage by threading between monitored zones. Once over open water, the aircraft climbed to an extreme altitude, possibly 40,000 feet or higher, well beyond normal cruising levels. At that altitude, cabin pressure is critical. If the pressurization system were manually deprogrammed, if the oxygen supply to the cabin were interrupted, passengers and crew would lose consciousness within minutes. Death would follow shortly after. The cockpit, however, has its own oxygen supply, independent, lasting hours. The aircraft, now silent and ghostly, would continue on autopilot for hours across the Indian Ocean until finally, fuel exhaustion. The engines flame out one by one. The aircraft descends and impacts the ocean at high speed, disintegrating on contact. This theory explains the deliberate turns, the disabled systems, the lack of distress calls. It is cold, calculated, precise, and it is supported by some of the evidence, but not all. Theory 2, the ghost flight. The alternative is less sinister, but no less tragic. In this version, the disappearance was not planned. It was catastrophic failure, a fire in the avionics bay, smoke in the cockpit, rapid decompression, an electrical malfunction cascading through critical systems. Pilots are trained for emergencies. Their first instinct, turn back, find the nearest airport, get the aircraft on the ground. That could explain the sharp turn. But in a smoke-filled cockpit, with alarms blaring, oxygen levels dropping, decision-making deteriorates rapidly. Hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, is insidious. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. You feel fine until you don't. Confusion, euphoria, impaired judgment. Pilots might disable systems, trying to isolate the problem, inadvertently cutting off communication. They might believe they're heading towards safety when they're flying away from it. Pause. If both pilots lost consciousness, if everyone on board succumbed to hypoxia, the aircraft would continue flying on autopilot. A ghost flight. No one at the controls, no one aware. Just a machine, dutifully following its last programmed heading, until the fuel runs out. This theory explains the silence, the lack of distress calls, the hours of continued flight. It is tragic, accidental, human, and it too is supported by some evidence, but not all. Both theories fit fragments of the data, neither explains everything, and that is the curse of MH370. Every answer creates new questions, every solution incomplete. To understand why MH370 has never been found, you must first understand the Indian Ocean. It is not a single body of water, it is a world. Covering more than 70 million square kilometers, it is the third largest ocean on Earth. But size is only part of the challenge. The ocean floor in the search area is not flat. It is a violent landscape. Underwater mountain ranges, taller than the Himalayas, trenches plunging 7 kilometers deep, volcanic ridges, plateaus, canyons, and it is dark, pitch black. No sunlight penetrates beyond 200 meters. At the depths being searched, 4,000 meters, sometimes deeper, the pressure is crushing, the temperature near freezing. Scanning such terrain requires sonar, sound waves bouncing off the ocean floor, painting a picture 1 pixel at a time. It is slow, painstaking, and even then, wreckage can be hidden, buried under sediment, wedged in crevices, obscured by topography. Between 2014 and 2017, search vessels scanned 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, an area larger than England. They found shipwrecks, geological formations, lost cargo containers, but no trace of MH370. Then, in 2015, something appeared. A piece of debris, a flaperon, part of the wing, washed ashore on Reunion Island, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean. It was confirmed. The part came from MH370. Over the following months, more debris appeared on beaches in Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, Madagascar, fragments of interior paneling, seat cushions, engine cowling. Each piece confirmed the same thing. The aircraft had broken apart, violently. But debris tells you where the ocean carried it, not where it came from. Currents in the Indian Ocean are powerful, unpredictable. Debris can drift for years, traveling thousands of miles. The wreckage confirmed MH370 had crashed, but it did not reveal where. And without the black boxes, the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, investigators had no way to reconstruct the final moments. The black boxes are designed to emit a locator signal for 30 days after impact. But MH370 disappeared in March 2014. Search vessels didn't reach the primary search area until months later. By then, the batteries were dead, the signals silent. 3 official investigations, Malaysian, Australian, international, reached the same conclusion. The aircraft crashed into the southern Indian Ocean. But the precise location could not be determined. And without the wreckage, the cause could not be confirmed. In the aftermath of MH370, the aviation industry was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Aircraft could still vanish. For all the technology, the redundancy, the safety protocols, a 250-ton machine carrying hundreds of people could disappear into thin air, and no one knew why. Regulations changed. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, mandated that all commercial aircraft carry tracking devices capable of transmitting location data every minute during flight. Previously, it had been every 30 to 60 minutes. Underwater locator beacons, attached to black boxes, were required to transmit for 90 days instead of 30. Cockpit voice recorders, which previously recorded only 2 hours of audio, were upgraded to capture 25 hours. These changes were direct responses to the lessons of MH370. But rules and technology do not bring back the lost. They do not answer families. They do not solve the mystery. They simply prevent the next one. 10 years have passed since Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared. A decade. and still the mystery endures. Online, theories proliferate, some rational, some absurd. Conspiracy theories thrive in the absence of evidence. Russian hijackers, cyber warfare, cargo conspiracies, government cover-ups, each more elaborate than the last. But for the families, the theories are noise. What they want is simple: a location, a final resting place, proof that their loved ones are gone, not lost. Naren still speaks at remembrance events, still advocates for continued searching, not because he believes the mystery can be solved, but because he believes it must be acknowledged. Naren, if we stop searching, we're saying their lives didn't matter, that it's okay for 239 people to vanish without a trace. I can't accept that. None of us can. In 2018, the official search was suspended. In 2022, Malaysia announced it would consider resuming the search if credible new evidence emerged. But credible evidence has not emerged, and so MH370 remains. Not a footnote, not a closed case, but an open wound. A reminder that even in an age of satellites, algorithms, and constant connectivity, the world still has places where answers disappear. Some mysteries do not resolve neatly. Some stories end without closure. And until MH370